The smell wasn't of food. It was of salt, smoke, and burned leather. On the deck of a battered pirate ship, a small fire cracked between ropes and cannons. The sea was calm, the sails hung torn and tired, and over the faint flame a strip of hardened leather sizzled like meat that wasn't meat. Men once called it dinner. They were the crew of Captain Henry Morgan, corsairs of the Caribbean. In early 1671, during one of history's strangest voyages, hunger stripped them of legend and pride. Before the rum, before the treasure, before the myth, there was only the hunger. This is the true story of the day pirates ate leather. The year was 1671. England and Spain had been at war for decades, and the Caribbean was their floating frontier. Among the men who ruled that frontier was Henry Morgan, a Welsh privateer, not technically a pirate, but something close. He carried the King's papers, a license to attack Spain's ships and cities in exchange for gold and glory. Morgan's base was Port Royal, Jamaica, a place of heat, rum, and lawless energy. From there, he launched his most daring plan yet, to cross the Isthmus of Panama and strike the Spanish city of Panama itself, one of the richest ports in the New World. But by the time he set sail, peace had already been declared between England and Spain. Morgan either didn't know or didn't care. He gathered 1,200 men, 5 ships, and 32 canoes, and set off anyway. Their path cut through swamps, rivers, and jungle, a march that would become a legend of exhaustion. Halfway across the isthmus, the rivers ran dry. Their canoes grounded in mud, and the men were forced to continue on foot. They carried muskets, powder, and little else. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with insects, and worst of all, their food, what little hardtack and salted meat they'd brought, was gone. For days they wandered hungry. The jungle swallowed sound. The men spoke less and less. They looked for villages, for anything the Spaniards might have left behind. But the Spaniards, warned of Morgan's coming, had fled, taking their grain, their livestock, even their fruit trees. When the pirates reached the first huts, they found only leather bags scattered on the floor. Empty. Desperation followed. And then necessity. One of Morgan's buccaneers later wrote what they did. They first took the leather and sliced it in pieces, beat it between stones, dipped it often in the water of the river to render it tender, then stripped the hair and roasted it upon the fire. Thus cooked, they ate it, helping it down with frequent gulps of water. It was, in every sense, eating their own boots. The taste? None. The texture? Hard, rubbery, bitter with smoke. But it was food, or at least it pretended to be. They chewed leather for a week. Some boiled it to soften it. Others burned it black and swallowed it whole. Hunger had no dignity left. They dreamed of bread, of salt, of anything that wasn't hide. At a place called Barbacoa, they finally stumbled upon a small grotto where 2 sacks of wheat, 2 jars of wine, and a handful of plantains remained. For the first time in days, they ate like men again. But it wouldn't last. The following week returned them to the same misery: roots, wild plants, scraps of bark, and leather once more. When they finally reached Panama City, they were ghosts. Sunken eyes, torn clothes, bellies drawn tight as drums. And then the ghosts turned violent. The hunger that had gnawed at their stomachs now burned in their minds. They stormed the city, tortured captives, killed civilians, and, when nothing was left to steal, they set Panama on fire. The smoke of the city joined the smoke of their hunger. That moment changed Henry Morgan forever. The man who had left Jamaica as a privateer returned as something else, a pirate in truth, outside the law. In later years, Morgan denied many of his worst acts. He claimed he had the greatest abhorrence for piracy and robbery. He even sued the publisher of the book that exposed his deeds, Buccaneers of America, written by Alexander Exquemelin, the ship's surgeon who had marched beside him. Morgan won the lawsuit. He escaped punishment, and in a twist that history could barely believe, he was knighted by King Charles II, becoming Sir Henry Morgan, Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, and later acting governor. He even sat as a judge in the Admiralty Court, condemning the very kind of men he had once led. But for all the honors, all the polished medals and formal dinners, one memory never faded: that march through the jungle and the taste of burned leather. Henry Morgan's story wasn't unique. History remembers many who ate leather when food disappeared. During the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the starving defenders were said to gnaw the straps of their shields. In 1759, the crew of the sloop Dolphin chewed the linings of their breeches and shoes after 3 months adrift. And in the frozen north of 1819, Arctic explorer John Franklin, later called the man who ate his boots, survived by boiling his shoes in melted snow. Across centuries and continents, hunger erased pride. Leather, meant to protect the body, became its last refuge. The world remembers Henry Morgan for his rum, a smiling face on bottles, the symbol of the carefree pirate. But that isn't who he was, not in 1671. Not on that silent deck under the burning sun. He was a man whose crew roasted leather to stay alive, a man who crossed a jungle on faith and fury, a man who discovered, perhaps too late, that survival leaves its own scars. When the fire died and the leather turned to ash, they had learned something no legend could ever teach: that glory fades, but hunger does not. They say history tastes of victory, but sometimes it tastes like leather. The sails caught wind again, the fire went out, and the smell of burned hide drifted over the quiet sea. For a brief moment, the pirates of the Caribbean were not legends, only men, and very, very hungry.